I stood outside the house where I grew up, the winter wind clawing through the thin thrift store coat I had chosen on purpose, frayed at the cuffs, missing a button, deliberately worn so no one inside would suspect it was merely a costume. Through the frosted windows, warm, yellow light spilled across silhouettes moving in celebration. I could hear laughter, clinking glasses, the high-pitched shimmer of women admiring each other's dresses. And right in the center of the living room, hanging beneath the glossy chandelier, was a massive banner. "Congratulations, Vivienne, our CEO." My sister's triumph displayed like a family crest. They had not invited me home for love or reunion. They invited me so I could witness my own supposed failure reflected in her success. They thought I would shrink when placed beside her glow. What they didn't know was that the woman they were waiting to belittle tonight was the founder of a $1.5 billion empire. They saw my worn boots. They saw my cheap purse with a broken zipper. They saw the ponytail I tied without care, but they never saw me. And tonight, I was ready to observe exactly how far people would go to mistreat someone they believed had nothing left to offer. The front door opened before I even reached for the handle. My mother, Loretta Hart, stepped into the doorway with a smile so polite it bordered on brittle. She looked dressed for an upscale holiday gala, emerald satin dress, pearls, hair meticulously curled. Her eyes swept over me like a scanner evaluating damage. "Well, you made it," she said, stepping aside without offering a hug. "Everyone's in the living room. Try not to track snow in, dear." I stepped inside, closing the door behind me as warm air washed over my cold skin. The house still smelled of cinnamon and cranberry cider, the way it always did on Christmas Eve. Garlands wrapped the banister, candles flickered on side tables, and the scent of expensive wine drifted from the kitchen. It should have felt like home. Instead, I felt as though I were trespassing in a museum of memories that no longer belonged to me. Voices from the living room halted when I entered. Conversations paused. A few strained smiles appeared, the kind polite people use when greeting someone they'd forgotten was on the guest list. My father, Richard Hart, lounged in his favorite leather armchair, reading something on his tablet. He didn't bother standing. "Oh, Evelyn," he said, glancing up only long enough to register that it was, in fact, me. "We thought you might get stuck working late at wherever you're working now." "The bookstore," my mother added quickly, as if clarifying my low status for any guests who might not know. "She's still there." Someone across the room murmured, "Retail during the holidays, my goodness." I forced a small smile. Let them believe what they wished. Tonight I was gathering data. Aunt Martha approached with the eager expression people wear when they're about to deliver an insult disguised as concern. "Sweetheart, you look chilled to the bone. Didn't you bring a proper winter coat? Honey, at your age you have to take better care of yourself." "I'll keep that in mind," I said softly. Before she could continue, another voice chimed in from behind her, sharp heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Vivienne had arrived. She floated into the room like a scene from a magazine cover, wearing a tailored ivory blazer that looked custom-made, hair curled in glossy waves, makeup flawless. The entire room shifted toward her as though pulled by gravity. People hugged her, congratulated her, admired her glow, the glow of someone recently crowned CEO with a $600,000 salary, and when she finally turned to me, her smile softened into something delicate and patronizing. "Oh, Evelyn," she said, as if surprised to discover I existed. "You're here. I wasn't sure you'd come to events like this anymore." I clasped my battered purse, playing the part. "I didn't want to miss celebrating you." She laughed lightly, as though I had said something adorably naive. "Well, thank you." Then she tapped her manicured nails against her champagne flute. "It's amazing what setting real goals can do, isn't it? Hard work pays off." That was for the audience, her subtle reminder that I was the sister who hadn't worked hard enough. Her husband, Miles, stepped forward with a grin that tried too hard. "We might be house hunting soon," he announced proudly. Something in the executive district. At least 4,000 square feet. You wouldn't believe the properties we've been touring. I'm sure they're beautiful, I said. He nodded, already dismissing me in search of someone more impressive to talk to. I shifted aside to avoid blocking the path of relatives rushing to compliment Vivienne's outfit, her title, her success. I felt buzzed by the intensity of it. Their energy, their pride, their eagerness to associate themselves with her ascent. Then a soft tap of a cane caught my attention. Grandma Hart made her way toward me, leaning heavily on her silver cane. Her face, though wrinkled with age, carried the same familiar disappointment it had carried for years. "Child," she said, patting my arm. "What happened to that bright girl you once were? You had such potential, Evelyn. It breaks my heart." "Life takes turns you don't expect," I murmured. She shook her head. "Well, not everyone is meant to shine." And with that, she drifted away to admire Vivienne's diamond earrings. I exhaled slowly. Every condescending word was another drop in a bucket I had been carrying for years. How heavy it had become. And how light I felt knowing I would soon put it down forever. Dinner preparations were in full swing the next moment. The clatter of serving dishes, my mother muttering directions, wine being poured. Throughout it all, I watched my family with a strange detachment, as though observing them from behind glass. Their conversations were lively and sophisticated. Stock market fluctuations, corporate expansions, new real estate investments. When my name came up, it was only to fill the silence. "Evelyn works at that little bookstore downtown," my mother told a neighbor. "It's quaint, a good way to stay occupied." "Books are lovely," the woman replied with a pitying smile. A few relatives nodded, satisfied that my life fit neatly inside the small, unimpressive box they had crafted for it. As I stood near the entryway, I heard footsteps approaching and quietly turned my head. Miles was whispering to someone over the phone, his voice tight and rushed. "No, the review can't happen now," he hissed. "I told you I handled it. If Apex Vault sees those discrepancies, we're finished." He ended the call abruptly when he noticed me watching. He forced a smile, too wide, too quick. "All good?" I asked politely. "Perfect," he replied, but his flickering eyes said otherwise. Another piece of the puzzle slid into place. My mother called out that appetizers were ready. People swarmed to the table, reaching for tiny pastries, artisanal cheeses, olives imported from Italy. Vivienne positioned herself near the center of the room, clearly primed for another round of praise. It happened quickly, too quickly to be coincidence. A hush fell over the room. My father nudged the man beside him. My mother straightened her necklace. Vivienne cleared her throat with the confidence of someone accustomed to delivering news worth celebrating. "I have an announcement," she said. Everyone leaned forward. She paused, savoring the anticipation. "Tomorrow afternoon I will be meeting with representatives from Apex Vault Technologies." The room erupted. Gasps, applause, champagne splashing. Apex Vault, my company. "They requested me specifically," she continued. "If this partnership moves forward, it could double our firm's revenue next year. This is a major step for our family." "Our family," her mother echoed proudly, glancing at me for only a fraction of a second, as though embarrassed to admit I was part of it too. I kept my expression neutral, though a tiny spark flared in my chest. They had no idea. As the excitement continued, I slipped toward the kitchen for a moment of quiet. My head buzzed. Not from humiliation this time, but from the collision of two worlds they didn't yet know had already met. I paused near the counter when I heard voices in the adjacent pantry. "Are you certain about tonight?" my father asked quietly. "It seems excessive." "We can't coddle her forever," my mother replied sharply. "The intervention is for her own good. If she sees how far behind she is, maybe she'll finally make changes. Vivienne even wrote talking points." My father sighed. "And the job applications?" "They're in the bag. We'll present them after dessert." I stepped back into the hallway as silently as a shadow. Intervention. Of course, They hadn't invited me home for Christmas Eve. They had invited me home to fix me, or what they believed needed fixing. I returned to the living room just as Vivienne launched into a detailed explanation of expansion strategies and market forecasts. Everyone listened with rapt attention, heads nodding, wine glasses raised. They were proud, they were dazzled, they were blind. And I, standing alone near the coat closet, holding a purse they assumed matched my net worth, was invisible. Invisible to everyone except myself. My mother tapped a glass, calling everyone to the table. Dinner was served, polished silverware gleaming, crystal goblets ready for toasts. I sat near the far end of the table, the seat reserved for those who didn't matter. As the main course arrived, the conversation returned to Vivienne's success. It flowed over me, around me, past me, never touching me unless someone made a passive attempt to include me. "So, Evelyn," an uncle asked loudly, "how's the bookstore life treating you? Must be relaxing." "Simple." "Sure," I answered quietly. "It keeps me busy." "Busy," he repeated with a chuckle. "That's one word for it." And then they all laughed. Vivienne raised her glass with a serene smile. "To new beginnings," she said, "for those willing to pursue them." Everyone toasted, except me. I simply watched the light catch the rim of my glass while an old truth settled deeper into my bones. They didn't want me to change. They wanted me small. Because my smallness made their brightness feel bigger. But the thing about pretending to be small is that you eventually learn exactly who sees you that way, and who always will. Outside, snow began to fall harder, blanketing the world beyond the window in white, while inside the house, judgment and superiority wrapped themselves around these people like expensive scarves. I swallowed a sip of water and glanced around the table, memorizing their faces. Faces that believed I had no power, no purpose, no future. Faces that would look very different by tomorrow afternoon. If they thought this was the night they would break me, they were wrong. This was the night I finally understood just how ready I was to let the truth speak for itself. The next morning felt strangely bright for Christmas Eve, as if the world outside our windows had no idea what kind of performance was being staged inside the Hart household. By the time I stepped into the dining room, the entire family had already shifted into full ceremonial mode. Conversations polished, smiles sharpened, postures elongated as though invisible strings were pulling everyone upward. Today wasn't a holiday for them. It was a coronation. The long mahogany table gleamed beneath the weight of polished silverware and holiday centerpieces. People weren't talking about memories or childhood stories or anything resembling family warmth. They were talking about money, promotions, quarterly earnings, property taxes, vacation homes, the kinds of things people use to declare social rank without admitting that's what they were doing. My Aunt Katrina was mid-sentence as I approached, waving her jeweled hand as if she were conducting a small orchestra. "Well, you know how it is in Boston's finance district. If your bonus isn't at least into six figures, they assume you're part-time." Her laugh rang out like silver bells. "That's the difference between us and the rest of the town," Uncle Ron added proudly. "We don't settle, not like some people." Several eyes flicked toward me. I simply nodded and headed to the sideboard to pour myself coffee. Vivienne entered moments later, and the effect was instant. Gravity shifted, conversation stilled, heads turned. The crown jewel had arrived. She wore a soft cream sweater dress that looked effortlessly expensive, a single diamond pendant catching the morning light. Her cheeks glowed, hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. "Morning, everyone," she said in a warm, poised tone. "Sorry I'm late. I had a quick call with one of our board members." A murmur of admiration rippled through the room. Calling a board member before breakfast? What a marvel. My mother practically glowed. "Honey, come sit. Your father saved your spot." Vivienne sat at the head of the table, as if that were always her seat, and immediately began recounting a conversation about corporate negotiations. She described her leadership strategy, The expansion projections for her company, her plans to restructure internal teams in the new year. Every sentence was a presentation, every gesture was a display, and the family absorbed every word, nodding, interjecting, praising her with the enthusiasm of devoted followers. I took a drink of my coffee and felt the bitter heat against my tongue. No one had asked me a single thing. My cousin Leah arrived late, rushed, cheeks flushed from the cold, but even she paused to beam at Vivian. "Oh my goodness, Viv, I still can't believe it. You're officially a CEO. That's incredible." Vivienne brushed a strand of hair behind her ear with modesty so fake it was almost elegant. "It's been a long time coming, but yes, it feels right." My father, Richard, folded his newspaper and tilted his head proudly. "When you were 12, we knew you'd be running a company someday. You just had that look." "And Evelyn?" Aunt Katrina asked brightly. "Did you ever picture her running something?" A few people chuckled, as though she'd told a joke. My father cleared his throat. "Well, Evelyn was always more dreamy, creative, not so career-driven." "Some people bloom later," Grandma Hart offered, though her tone suggested she wasn't convinced I would bloom at all. I smiled politely, then caught Vivienne's amused glance, her mouth curving just slightly, as if savoring the contrast being drawn between us. I reached for a croissant, but paused when I heard my uncle whisper to his wife, not nearly quietly enough. "It's sad, really. One daughter soaring to the top and the other stuck at, what, minimum wage?" His wife whispered back. "At a bookstore. She said it yesterday. Maybe she likes it. Some people don't have big ambitions." Ambitions! As if ambition was only valid when visible. As if quiet success lacked legitimacy. I sat down at the far end of the table. My chair wobbled slightly, another reminder of where I fit in the hierarchy of this home. Vivian's voice carried down the length of the table, buoyant and glowing. "And tomorrow is the big meeting. Apex Vault is expecting great things from Rivian Dynamics. If the partnership is approved, our stock value could jump dramatically by summer." Someone gasped. "Apex Vault? Isn't that the tech giant everyone's talking about?" "Oh yes," Vivian said, swirling her mimosa. "They're extremely selective, but they reached out to us, not the other way around." "That must mean they see something special in you," my mother said proudly. "I would say so," Vivian answered with a bright laugh. There was a beat of silence. Then my Aunt Martha turned her sympathetic gaze toward me. "Evelyn, dear, have you considered doing something more stable? More fitting for your age? You know, something that might lead to a real career?" I swallowed. "I'm fine with where I am." "But are you really?" she asked gently, as though diagnosing a terminal condition. "You're over 30, no partner, no children, no major accomplishments. This is the time when people start thinking about their future. And their retirement plans," another added. "And their assets," someone else chimed in. Assets, future, accomplishments. Funny how these people defined success with such precision, yet remained blind to the fact that the most successful person in the room was sitting quietly, eating a croissant, letting them talk. Miles walked in late, his phone glued to his ear. "Yes, but the data should have been clean by now." He stopped when he saw everyone watching and lowered his voice. "We'll talk later," he said, then loosened his tie as though suffocating. My father frowned. "Everything all right?" "Just routine year-end headaches," Miles replied, though sweat glistened at his hairline. Vivian shot him a look that suggested he should be better at hiding panic. Presentation mattered more to her than truth. Always had. And then, as though remembering something important, Vivian tapped her glass lightly and stood. "I almost forgot," she announced. "I have another bit of good news." Everyone quieted again, eager for the next trophy she was about to unveil. Vivian placed a hand over her stomach. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, the entire dining room burst into pure, unrestrained joy. Cheers filled the air. Chairs scraped back as people rushed to congratulate her. My mother cried out, "My first grandchild!" and kissed Vivian's cheeks repeatedly. My father raised his glass. Someone uncorked champagne. And then the remarks began. This baby will inherit everything. It will continue the Hart legacy. Vivian's child will be the future of this family. Then, as surely as gravity, their attention shifted toward me. Aunt Katrina smiled sweetly. Maybe you can help with childcare, Evelyn. It would give you purpose. Something meaningful to contribute, someone else added, since Vivian will be so busy leading her company. Yes, my mother said, clasping her hands as though arranging the final piece of her perfect life. It would be ideal. You've always been so available. I studied her expression, the serene satisfaction she wore when a plan fell perfectly into place. They didn't just want me small, they wanted me useful in my smallness. Before I could respond, Vivian continued, and with the Apex Vault meeting tomorrow, there couldn't be a better time. Everything is aligning for me. Everything, my mother echoed. Everything except the truth they refused to imagine. My cousin Daniel suddenly leaned forward, speaking to Vivian but pointing in my direction. I don't mean this unkindly, but isn't it strange that your sister never quite catches up? You've excelled in every chapter of life. And she, well, Vivian shrugged. Some people choose comfort over ambition. And in that sentence, so effortless, so dismissive, she perfectly summarized what my family believed about me, that my life was a series of choices too small to admire. I set my fork down, letting their words drift over me like snowfall. I didn't flinch, didn't shrink, didn't argue. Arguing would imply they had a point. They didn't. After another round of praise for Vivian, the family drifted into smaller pockets of conversation. My parents retreated to the kitchen to whisper about the logistics of the meeting. Vivienne moved to the living room to accept another round of admiration from relatives eager to orbit her glow. Miles took a phone call outside, pacing like a man waiting for a verdict. I sipped my coffee and absorbed the scene. This wasn't jealousy. It wasn't resentment. It wasn't even pain anymore. It was clarity. Every word they spoke confirmed exactly why I had hidden who I was. They didn't see me, not because I was invisible, but because they didn't bother looking. They saw what they wanted to see, a failed daughter, a soft disappointment. If they believed I had nothing, they didn't have to ask themselves why they had given me nothing. Evelyn? A voice murmured. I turned to see Grandma Hart watching me with an intense, almost pleading expression. You should try harder, she whispered. You still have time to become someone. I appreciate that, I replied softly. She nodded sadly, patting my hand as though consoling a lost cause. As she walked away, I noticed something unexpected in her eyes. Not cruelty this time, but fear. Fear that the narrative they built around Vivian might crack if anyone else dared to shine. A few minutes later, I wandered to the hallway leading toward the back of the house. I needed a breath, a moment to reset before the inevitable intervention they had so carefully planned. But as I turned the corner near the kitchen, I froze, hearing my father's voice again. Are we sure about doing this today? He asked. My mother's reply was low, but unmistakably firm. If we don't intervene now, she'll drift forever. We can't allow our family to look fractured, not when Vivian is achieving so much. And the talking points? My father asked. I'll hand them out before dessert, she answered. Everyone knows their role. They'll tell her she needs structure, a better job, financial planning, everything a woman her age should have figured out by now. And if she resists? We'll push harder, she said. For her own good. She said it like a mother locking a door for a child's safety, not recognizing she was the one building the cage. I stepped back silently, heart steady, not heavy, not broken, just steady. So that was their plan, not celebration, correction. Tonight was never meant to honor Christmas Eve. It was meant to humble me, to force me into the version of myself they preferred. In the living room, Vivian laughed again, her voice ringing through the house. Everyone leaned toward her, drawn by her glow. I watched them, watched her, and finally understood what tonight truly represented. It wasn't the end of something. It wasn't even the beginning. It was the last time I would ever let them tell my story for me. Because tomorrow, at 2 in the afternoon, the story of who I was and who they believed me to be would collide. And when it did, everything they thought they knew would come undone. They gathered in the living room as if preparing for a board meeting, not a family holiday. Chairs were pulled into a perfect circle, pillows straightened, coffee table cleared. My mother, Loretta, stood at the center like a conductor arranging her orchestra. My father had his iPad propped on his knee, already typing notes. Vivienne hovered near the fireplace in a stance she probably practiced for corporate presentations, chin lifted, shoulders back, hands clasped in front of her. And everyone else took their seat with expressions of exaggerated concern. When I walked in, every head turned as if the person they'd been waiting to fix had finally arrived. "Evelyn," my mother said with a tone too soft to be genuine, "come sit down, sweetheart. We want to talk to you." I sat carefully, clutching the worn purse I intentionally brought tonight. I recognized the atmosphere instantly. This wasn't a conversation. This was an intervention, a performance they believed would reshape my life into something they approved of. Loretta cleared her throat, giving everyone a prim smile. "We love you very much," she began, which was always the preface to something deeply unloving. "And because we love you, we need to address a few concerns." Several relatives nodded solemnly, as though sworn to duty. My Aunt Martha leaned forward first. "Honey, you're such a sweet girl, but do you think you're truly happy, working in a bookstore at your age, living in that tiny apartment?" "She needs stability," someone murmured. "She needs direction," another offered. "She needs to start thinking like a grown woman," someone else added. The chorus built around me, their voices threaded together into a single theme. Evelyn Hart was a problem requiring coordinated action. My father leaned forward. "We're worried about your future. You're over 30, Evelyn. You have no assets, no relationships of substance, no upward trajectory. This family believes in achievement, in ambition, in progress." He glanced toward Vivian, who smiled modestly, the way she always did when someone compared us. My mother lifted a large gift bag from beside the sofa. "So we put something together for you," she said brightly. "Some tools to help you get back on track." She placed the bag in my lap. It was heavy. "Go on," she encouraged. "Take a look." I pulled out the first item, a budget planning workbook titled "Take Control of Your Life in 30 Days." The irony nearly made me laugh. Next came discount store gift cards, a box of resume paper, a stack of printed job applications for receptionist and entry-level admin roles, another set for server positions at local cafes, a pamphlet on financial literacy for beginners. Then came the worst of it, a sealed yellow envelope with job application packet, starter careers typed on the front. It slipped from my mother's hand and fell into mine. A corner of a document poked out, revealing a phrase I almost missed. Estate review. Loretta snatched it quickly, tucking it back into the bag with a forced laugh. "Not that one yet. We'll save it for later." But I had seen enough to know this went deeper than humiliation. Something about inheritance was being hidden. Something they didn't want me to know. My Aunt Katrina placed a gentle hand on her chest. "We're all here because we care, because we want you to succeed, to finally break out of whatever rut you've been in." "Exactly," my mother agreed. "You've been drifting. You need structure." Vivian stepped forward then, moving into place like she was about to lead a seminar. "Evelyn," she began, soft but sharp, "I've been thinking a lot about your situation, and I want to offer you something meaningful." She paused to let anticipation settle. Hers, not mine. "My new role comes with the authority to hire an assistant. It's an entry-level position, The salary would be modest, but it would give you a stable routine, purpose. You'd learn how a real company functions. The room hummed with approval. That's very generous, Uncle Ron said. So thoughtful, Aunt Martha added. Helping the less fortunate in your own family. What a good soul you are. Vivian beamed. I stared at her. My brilliant older sister, the one they'd chosen as the family's prodigy. She believed she was throwing me a lifeline. She had no idea she was tossing rope into the ocean at a woman who owned a fleet of ships. Thank you, I whispered, pushing tears into my eyes for effect. I don't know what to say. My father smiled, relieved. Say yes, Vivienne is giving you a chance. Don't squander it. Yes, Loretta echoed. Think of how big this could be for you. Miles chimed in from the corner, crossing his arms. If you accept the job, I can also get you invited to some networking mixers. You'd need to improve your wardrobe, of course, but people are always willing to help those who show effort. His eyes slid over me with unsettling interest, evaluating, not admiring. The implication in his tone was unmistakable. His help came with expectations. Charming, I murmured. Vivian forged ahead. So here's the plan. I start my new role on January 2nd. You'll give your notice at the bookstore right after the holidays. You'll move back home to help with the baby when it arrives, and we'll set short-term and long-term goals for you. My father held up his iPad. I'm creating an action plan right now. Measurable steps, accountability metrics. We can check in weekly. And no more isolation, Aunt Martha insisted. It isn't healthy for a woman your age. Exactly, my mother said, crossing her arms. You've had far too much freedom. It hasn't done you any good. Something inside me flickered, hot, then cold. Isolation, freedom. They said the words like they were curses, not choices. I raised my eyebrows. Has anyone considered what I want? The room quieted briefly, but only to allow space for disappointment. My mother shook her head. What you want and what you need are two very different things. Sometimes families, my father added, must make difficult decisions for the greater good. The greater good, I repeated slowly, tasting the bitterness in the phrase. Aunt Katrina nodded approvingly. Successful people surround themselves with successful people. You've been living too small for too long, thinking small, associating small. Vivian smiled gently, as though she were doing me a kindness. Exactly. You've been isolated. Your world is tiny compared to what it could be. This is a chance to grow. To transform, my uncle added. To become someone, Grandma Hart said. Soft, final, devastating. I felt every condescending remark land like light blows. Individually, they were almost nothing. Together, they were the language of a family who needed me diminished so they could feel tall. I took a slow breath. What kind of transformation do you think I need? My father answered first, blunt as always. Realistically, you're 32 with no meaningful accomplishments, no assets, no relationships, no direction. Vivian is offering you a lifeline. His words hung in the air like smoke. Vivian soaked in the attention. There's one more thing, she said, reaching for Miles's hand. Her engagement ring sparkled like a spotlight. We're expecting. Cheers exploded across the room. People rushed to her, hugging, praising, crying tears of joy. Phones were pulled out for photos. Someone popped champagne. And then, inevitably, the spotlight found me again. This baby will inherit everything worthwhile in the Hart legacy, Vivian said brightly. Her smile never reached her eyes. She let the weight of her words settle. Someone added, maybe Evelyn could help with childcare. It would give her life direction. Yes, my mother agreed. You can move home, help Vivian, support her career. I nodded slowly, if needed. The room roared with satisfaction. They believed I had accepted my place, the caretaker, the assistant, the one who would support Vivian's glow from the shadows. They didn't realize I had accepted nothing. They continued mapping out my future like a project plan. They spoke about me in the third person, their voices floating above my head like echoes from another world. She's just lost. She doesn't know how to think long term. She needs structure. She should be grateful for the chance. Every sentence was an assumption, an erasure. Finally, unable to endure the echo chamber of their certainty any longer, I asked, "What if I don't want this future?" The room froze, surprised I had a voice of my own. My mother tilted her chin. "You don't know what you want. You've been lost so long, we can't take your preferences seriously." Preferences? As if my life were a buffet and they were choosing the dish for me. Vivienne stepped forward, lifting her chin with gentle superiority. "Evelyn, resisting doesn't serve you. We're trying to help you succeed." I laughed softly, not bitter, just tired. "Is that what this is?" "Yes," she said firmly, as if my agreement were unnecessary. Miles cleared his throat, his voice oily. "The key to success is accepting help from people who know better." I looked at the man who had married my sister not because he loved her, but because he loved what she represented. "And you," I asked him, "know better?" He smiled, but his eyes hardened. "More than you think." My father stood abruptly, lifting his glass for a final pronouncement. "This intervention is for your own good. We will not stand by and watch you throw your life away." I scanned the room, at every familiar face, every satisfied posture, every assumption of superiority, and only one thought pulsed through me. They were so certain they were saving me. So certain I needed their guidance, so certain I had nothing. But they had forgotten something critical. They didn't know me. Not really. Not the real me. And tomorrow, at 2:00, in a building they assumed belonged to a company that barely knew their names, they would learn exactly who I was, and who I had always been. I rose from my seat, looking at each of them one last time. "You think tonight is about fixing me," I said softly. "But tomorrow, you'll realize who really needs fixing." They stared, confused. I smiled gently, tucked my worn purse under my arm, and stepped out of the circle. Their intervention had ended. Mine had not yet begun. The snowfall thickened by the time dessert arrived, covering the neighborhood in white as if the world outside were softening while the world inside sharpened its claws. My family drifted back toward the living room, their movements organized and purposeful, as though continuing a script they had rehearsed together. Crystal coffee cups were distributed. The fireplace crackled. Everyone settled into their seats with tense anticipation, oblivious to the cold wind rattling the windows. They were waiting for Vivienne to speak again. She waited until the room grew quiet, then positioned herself near the mantel, where her corporate headshots were displayed in glossy frames. Her presence filled the space instantly. She lifted her phone, checking a notification with a small smile, then slipped it back into her pocket before turning toward the family. "All right," she began, her voice warm yet commanding. "Now that we've shared our news and celebrated together, I want to tell you more about tomorrow's meeting. I know you're all excited, and truthfully, so am I." Soft murmurs of encouragement rose around the room. Some leaned forward as if witnessing a monumental moment. "It's been a whirlwind these past few weeks," Vivienne continued. "But this partnership represents something more than just business. It represents long-term power, influence, and an entirely new future for Rivian Dynamics." "Tell us everything," Aunt Katrina urged eagerly. "Don't leave a single detail out." Vivienne nodded, perfectly prepared to oblige. Rivian is positioned for a major expansion year, and we're targeting large enterprise clients, Fortune 500 companies that require comprehensive technological transformation. We've shown innovative approaches that caught Apex Vault Technologies' attention. They reached out to us directly. "That's astonishing," my Uncle Ron said, brows raised. "Apex Vault doesn't chase people. People chase Apex Vault." The irony nearly made me laugh. "That's exactly right," Vivienne replied, with pride blooming in her smile. "They are known to be extremely selective. They don't just partner with anyone. So for them to choose us speaks volumes about the reputation I've been building. You, Grandma Hart corrected softly. Not us. Don't downplay your role, sweetheart. Vivian dazzled them with a modest nod. I've led our innovation teams for several years, so yes, my leadership has played a major role in our growth. My cousin leaned forward. But tell us, what exactly does Apex Vault want? What's the deal structure? Well, Vivian said, clearly savoring the moment, it's a high-level consulting partnership paired with software integration on a national scale. We'd essentially become Apex Vault's primary implementers for enterprise solutions over the next several years. That could be worth tens of millions, my father breathed. Likely more, Vivian replied, crossing one leg over the other. They've kept some details confidential for now, but tomorrow's meeting should finalize everything. Miles, who had returned from one of his suspicious phone calls, nodded gravely. This could catapult the company into a new revenue bracket. Vivian could be overseeing hundreds, if not thousands, of employees in just a few years. The excitement in the room was contagious, though none of it reached me. Their admiration swelled and swirled like a tide, lifting Vivian higher and higher while pressing me lower with every passing moment. Oh, and that's not all, Vivian added, unable to hide her delight. Apex Vault insisted on meeting at one of their subsidiary locations near the Arts District. At 2 o'clock sharp tomorrow. Their founder might even be there. Everyone gasped in unison. The founder? Grandma Hart clutched her pearls. Isn't that the billionaire? 1.5 billion, last estimate, Ron added helpfully, pulling his phone out to confirm numbers. Vivian straightened with pride that bordered on theatrical. Yes, the mysterious founder. No one knows their identity. They're extremely private. But their leadership style is legendary. Innovative, visionary, transformational. Partnering with them could alter the entire trajectory of my career. My mother sighed dreamily. I cannot believe my daughter is meeting with a billionaire tomorrow. Well, Vivian said airily, some of us aim high. That earned a ripple of approving laughter. I remained silent. My Aunt Martha reached for her teacup, her voice trembling with excitement. Did they say anything else? Anything about why they chose you? Vivian nodded. Their executive coordinator, Sarah, mentioned that Apex Vault was impressed by my reputation, my results, and my vision for Rivian's growth. They want someone who understands long-term scalability and can align with their philosophy. My mother clapped her hands once. Of course they do. That's exactly who you are. They'll be lucky to have you, another relative said. Vivian smiled, graciously accepting each compliment as if receiving tributes. I took a quiet sip of water. Miles, emboldened by the praise, added, and once this partnership is locked in, Vivian will have leverage beyond anything she's had before. She'll be on track for even more power, maybe even equity changes. Isn't that thrilling, Evelyn? Aunt Katrina asked, turning toward me with expectant eyes. Your sister is making history. It's wonderful, I said in a gentle tone, even though there was a sharpness beneath my ribs. My mother used the opportunity to underline her narrative. You see, dear? This is what happens when someone works hard and makes the right choices. Choices? Vivian echoed softly, her gaze touching me like a reminder. Mom leaned closer to me. Evelyn, imagine what you could become if you had even half of Vivian's discipline. My grandmother chimed in too, or her drive, or her ambition. That's why tomorrow is important, my father added. Being near greatness can inspire change in those who need it. Vivian lifted her chin proudly. Actually, that reminds me of something Sarah said earlier on the phone. The room hushed again, everyone hanging onto her words. She said the founder wants to meet with anyone who might be connected to community involvement. Apex Vault values family roots and authentic local relationships. My mother gasped. They want to meet us? It seems so, Vivian replied. Should we go? Martha asked eagerly. I'd love to meet a billionaire before I die. Ron elbowed her. Don't embarrass us. I hid a smile behind my glass. Vivian nodded. It could strengthen Rivian's presentation to show I come from a stable, connected, supportive family. My father puffed up with pride. Well, that's exactly who we are. My mother clapped her hands in delight. Tomorrow will be perfect. I almost choked. Perfect. Tomorrow, when they all unknowingly walked into my building. Tomorrow, when Vivian expected to meet a stranger who controlled her future, and instead would be meeting the sister she'd spent years diminishing. Aunt Katrina leaned forward eagerly. Vivian, what exactly do you think the founder will be like? Vivian's expression softened into awe. Brilliant. Strategic. A true innovator. Someone who sees the world differently. Someone who built something meaningful from the ground up. My uncle added, probably driven by integrity. Real leaders always are. My grandmother sighed. Such people have a rare gift. They change lives. I felt something in my chest tighten, not pain, but something close to pity. They admired me. Every quality they attributed to that anonymous founder, they admired me. They just didn't know it. Perhaps that was the cruelty of the night, not their words, but the fact that I could have walked into that room as the version of myself they respected, and they would have treated me completely differently. My thoughts were interrupted when Miles cleared his throat sharply. Speaking of integrity, Vivian, did you tell them about the new compliance measures Rivian adopted this quarter? Not yet, she said, but I plan to. He forced a smile that didn't match his frantic eyes. I wondered how long it would take for his secret to unravel. Soon, perhaps. Very soon. Vivian turned back to the room. And of course, tomorrow is only the beginning. Once I finalize this partnership, she paused for dramatic effect. I'll be positioned as the most influential executive Revion has ever had. Applause broke out. My mother couldn't contain her joy. I always knew one of my daughters would achieve greatness. There was no need to add who she meant. The room swelled with admiration again. Compliments, predictions, toasts. Vivian absorbed them all like sunlight, glowing brighter each second. I watched quietly, wondering how she would look in 24 hours when she realized the founder she idolized was the sister she had spent her life believing was beneath her. Eventually the noise softened, leaving only the hum of the fireplace and the gentle clatter of cups. Vivian's voice cut through the room once more, casual but pointed. Evelyn, you're familiar with the arts district, aren't you? I know it fairly well, I replied. Good. Perhaps tomorrow you can join us. You can help guide everyone to the location before we head into the meeting. My heart thudded once. She continued, I want the family there to support me. It will demonstrate unity, connection, authenticity. Apex Vault values community and strong roots. This could make a real difference. My mother nodded approvingly. Yes, take Evelyn with you. She can help. She's familiar with that part of town. Familiar. As if I were a resident, but not a participant. Someone who existed quietly on the margins. Of course, I murmured, lifting my cup to hide my expression. Vivienne beamed. Wonderful. Then it settled. I scanned the room one more time, absorbing every face, every assumption, every false sense of superiority. They thought tomorrow would elevate them. But tomorrow would expose them. They thought tomorrow was Vivian's destiny. But tomorrow was my revelation. They thought tomorrow would prove their greatness, but tomorrow would reveal their blindness. I took a slow breath and sighed softly. Tomorrow, I whispered under my breath, is going to be unforgettable. Snow blanketed the streets in a soft hush as I stepped outside for air, letting the cold bite at my cheeks while warmth and noise roared behind me from inside the house. The porch light cast a dim halo on the railing, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to breathe, really breathe, without anyone watching, judging, or waiting for me to fail. Tomorrow. That single word throbbed through my thoughts like a slow drum. everything would change tomorrow. Not because I wanted revenge, but because the truth had been buried long enough. My family had built an entire identity around who they believed I was. The weaker daughter, the drifting one, the disappointment. And I had let them underestimate me, let them ignore me, let them shape a version of me that fit comfortably inside their hierarchy. But only I knew how false that version truly was. A gust of wind blew across the yard, carrying laughter from inside the house. Vivienne's laughter. A sharp, delighted sound that once would have made me smile. Now it only reminded me of everything she had stolen without even realizing it. Attention, affection, space to grow. I tucked my hands deeper into my sleeves and stared at the sky. Snowflakes drifted lazily downward, each one melting the second it touched my skin. I wondered what they would say tomorrow when they saw the office built behind my bookstore. What they would feel when they learned that the founder they respected, the visionary they praised, the billionaire they admired, had been sitting at their table all along. My breath fogged in the air as the front door creaked open behind me. Miles stepped out, letting the door slam shut. He didn't seem to notice me standing on the edge of the porch until I shifted slightly and the snow crunched under my boot. He jumped, startled. "Oh," he said, forcing a grin. "Didn't see you there." "I figured," I replied quietly. He stuffed his hands into his pockets, eyes darting around as though searching for something invisible. Then he exhaled and leaned against the railing beside me. "It's freezing out here," he muttered. "I don't mind the cold." He snorted. "Of course you don't. You've always been adaptable." I let the comment hang. He studied me for a moment. "Look, Evelyn, earlier tonight, during the intervention, I hope you understood that I was trying to help." "Help," I repeated softly. "Is that what you call it?" He shifted uncomfortably, forcing another smile. "Yeah, I mean, I know things haven't been easy for you. I know you're not exactly thriving." His eyes skimmed over my thrift store coat. "But you're a good person. You deserve a chance." A chance. They all kept using that word as if I were clinging to the edge of a cliff and they were offering me a rope. They didn't realize I had wings. "And what chance is that?" I asked. "The chance to be Vivienne's assistant?" He laughed lightly, missing the sharpness beneath my tone. "It's a start. She's doing you a favor." I turned my head slightly, studying him. "And what about your offer? To get me into networking events?" He grinned, his eyes lingering on my face in a way that made my skin crawl. "Well, yeah, I meant that. You help me, I help you. That's how success works." "And how exactly would I help you?" He shrugged casually. "You know, by being supportive, by showing appreciation. By doing what women tend to do better than men, making connections, smoothing things over. It's a mutually beneficial dynamic." My stomach turned. So that was his angle. Manipulation disguised as mentorship. "Vivienne trusts you," I said carefully. "Doesn't she?" He froze for a fraction of a second, then forced a laugh. "Of course she does. But she doesn't know everything, does she?" His jaw tightened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I murmured, stepping back from the railing. "Just thinking aloud." He watched me warily, sensing something shifting beyond his understanding. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He stepped aside to answer it, his voice low, tight, panicked. "No, listen to me. If the numbers don't reconcile by tomorrow morning, we're dead. Do you understand? Apex Vault doesn't play around with discrepancies." My eyes narrowed. Discrepancies. Apex Vault. His voice dropped even lower. "Just fix it. I don't care how." That was enough to confirm what I suspected. Miles was hiding something, and whatever it was, tomorrow's meeting could unravel it. When he finally hung up, he realized I was still watching him. He forced a grin. "Just work stuff. You know how it is." "Yes," I said. "I do." He didn't like the way I said it. He went inside quickly, tugging his coat closed as though retreating from danger. I remained where I was, letting the cold settle deep into my lungs. A familiar heaviness pulled at me, the heaviness of secrets, of truths that shaped people without their knowledge. My mother had not meant for me to see that yellow envelope marked estate review. And the way she shoved it back into the bag, the way her voice faltered, there was something else buried beneath this family's polished image. Something they had been hiding. I stepped back inside, brushing snow from my sleeves. The living room had resumed its rhythm, people laughing loudly, returning to wine glasses and conversations. The earlier tension had dissolved into contentment now that they believed they had successfully saved me. Vivian spotted me near the hallway. She glided toward me, her smile warm but edged with superiority. She placed a hand on my arm, squeezing gently. "I hope tonight wasn't too overwhelming," she said. "I know it can feel like a lot when people care this much." My breath caught briefly. "Care," I repeated. She nodded. "Yes, we're trying to give you a future, one that makes sense." "And the future I already have doesn't make sense to you." "Well, no," she admitted. "It doesn't. But that's okay. Not everyone can see their own potential. Sometimes it takes another person to guide them." I held her gaze. "And you believe you're that person?" She didn't even hesitate. "Of course." The arrogance was so casual she didn't realize it was arrogance at all. It was simply the water she had always swum in. I forced a gentle smile. "Thank you for thinking of me." She patted my hand, pleased. "Good. I'm glad you understand." I understood perfectly. Later, after most people had drifted toward the kitchen for a second round of dessert, my grandmother approached me with a slow shuffle of her cane. She looked smaller than usual in the soft lamplight. "Come sit with me," she said, her voice quiet but insistent. I guided her to a seat near the window. Outside, the snow fell heavier than before, blanketing the world in white noise. She watched it for a moment before turning toward me. "You look tired, child," she said. "It's been a long night." "Ah," she nodded knowingly. "Family can do that, even when they mean well." I studied her carefully. "Do you think they mean well?" She sighed deeply. "Some do, some don't. Most don't know the difference." I swallowed. "Grandma, why did Mom hide that envelope? The estate review?" Her eyes flickered, sharp, searching. "You saw that?" "I did. What is she not telling me?" She breathed slowly, choosing her words. "Families hold on to control in strange ways, Evelyn. Sometimes to protect themselves, sometimes to protect the wrong things." I leaned closer. "What wrong things?" Before she could answer, my mother's voice cut across the room sharply. "Mother, don't exhaust Evelyn with heavy talk." Grandma's mouth tightened. "Loretta, the girl asked me a question, and I said she doesn't need the burden of old issues right now." My grandmother's eyes burned with something close to anger, rare for her. "Old issues become new wounds when you refuse to speak of them." My mother stiffened. "Not tonight." Grandma pressed her lips together and touched my hand. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "After tomorrow, everything will be easier to explain." Then she stood and walked away, her cane tapping steadily across the hardwood floor. I remained seated, staring at the snow, feeling the walls of our family's carefully constructed facade shift around me. A hidden inheritance, a secret decision, something they didn't want me to know, something Grandma believed I deserved to learn. The night wound down slowly. People gathered coats, hugged goodbye, stepped into the snow with flushed cheeks and warm hearts, confident that the future was bright for the Hart family, confident that Vivian was leading them into greatness, confident that I had accepted my designated role in their world. When the last car pulled away, I stood alone in the quiet living room, surrounded by the remnants of celebration and the sharp edges of truth. I gathered my purse, slipped my coat on, and buttoned the missing buttonhole with practiced ease. "Drive safe," my mother said from the doorway, her voice pleasant but shallow. I always do, I replied. As I stepped outside, snow continued to fall, settling on the path before me. Tomorrow. The word echoed again. Tomorrow held answers. Tomorrow held revelations. Tomorrow held everything they believed about me suspended above a cliff. I walked toward my car, my breath shaping small clouds in the air. By this time tomorrow, they would finally see me. Not the girl they tried to fix. Not the disappointment they whispered about. Not the shadow beside Vivian's spotlight. But the woman who built an empire they worshipped without knowing she existed. And nothing in their world would ever look the same again. The sun rose on Christmas morning with a muted, wintry glow, the kind that painted the sky in pale gold and soft lavender. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, images of the night before flickered like shards of glass. My mother handing me job applications, relatives nodding as if I were some community project they'd adopted, Vivienne offering me a $30,000 assistant position with the same tenderness someone might use while rescuing a stray dog. And then Grandma's whispered promise. After tomorrow, everything will be easier to explain. I stood by my apartment window, watching snow fall in gentle spirals. In the stillness of my small living room, minimalist furniture, soft lighting, warm wood shelves lined with books, I felt a kind of peace settle in my bones. This place, this life, this quiet independence, none of them knew it existed. None of them would have believed it belonged to me. At 8:30, my phone vibrated with a message in the Apex Vault secure channel. Sarah Chen, confirming today's meeting, team prepared, security briefed, conference room activated. I typed a short reply. Me. Understood. Proceed as planned. I closed my laptop with a quiet click and walked to the mirror. My reflection looked back at me with steady eyes. Calm, clear, ready. Not the woman they thought I was. The clock ticked. At 1 o'clock, I left my apartment and drove toward the arts district, snow drifting across the windshield like confetti preparing for an uninvited celebration. The streets were quieter than usual for a holiday, storefronts closed, sidewalks empty. My bookstore sat at the end of the block, its painted blue door adorned with a simple evergreen wreath. Cozy, unassuming, a place no one would associate with a billion-dollar company. At 1:15, I unlocked the door and flipped on the lights. Warm yellow tones glowed across the shelves, illuminating rows of novels, poetry collections, leather-bound classics. The air smelled faintly of coffee beans from the small counter near the back. This was the version of me my family knew, the bookstore girl. Quiet, harmless, harmlessly average. But deeper inside the building, behind a bookshelf that swung open with a biometric scan, the real world of Apex Vault existed. Glass walls, chrome surfaces, interactive boards, security systems, and a conference room large enough to host leaders from around the world. At 1:30 sharp, my phone buzzed. Mom, we're leaving now. Should be there in 15 minutes. Vivian, don't be late. This is too important. Miles, where do we park? I smiled faintly. I wasn't late. I was waiting. At 1:48, 2 SUVs pulled up in front of the store, tires crunching into the snow. I stepped outside just as the Hart family began climbing out, bundled in heavy coats and scarves, cheeks pink from the cold, energy buzzing with anticipation. My mother waved as though greeting a neighbor. Evelyn, perfect timing. You're already here. I open the shop most mornings, I replied gently. She nodded, as if I had reminded her of my lowly routine. Vivienne approached, her posture straight, her coat perfectly belted around her waist. She looked like a CEO on the cover of a winter business magazine, confident, glowing, utterly unaware. Ready? She asked. Yes, I said. Are you? She laughed lightly. Of course, today changes everything. I held her gaze. Yes, it does. They followed me into the bookstore. Several of them murmured polite compliments. It's cute, Aunt Martha said. Charming little place, Uncle Ron added. Amazing how you manage it all by yourself. Vivian glanced around. It's very humble, but it must feel comforting to have something small to care for. Something small. I let the words pass through me without reaction. My silence wasn't surrender, it was preparation. My father checked his watch impatiently. Evelyn, where exactly are we meeting the Apex Vault executives? Surely not here. Follow me, I replied softly. I walked toward the back corner of the store, where a shelf of classic literature stood innocently. Dickens, Austen, Steinbeck, Morrison. I placed my palm against the spine of an old leather-bound volume. A soft click echoed. The shelf shifted. Gasps filled the room as the bookshelf swung inward like a hidden door from a spy film, revealing a sleek, modern security vestibule lit with cool white LEDs. What? Vivian whispered, stepping forward. What is this? My mother's hand flew to her chest. Evelyn, what on earth? This way, I said. One by one, with stunned expressions and hesitant footsteps, they entered the security chamber. The biometric panel scanned my hand, confirming access, and the inner door slid open to reveal Apex Vault's private executive suite. The space unfolded before them in clean lines and soft glow, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the snowy city, glass conference tables illuminated from beneath, interactive touchscreens flickering with real-time analytics, a panoramic digital display tracking industry trends. My family stood frozen in awe. This, my father breathed, is unbelievable. Are we in the right place? My aunt whispered. This looks like a headquarters. It is, I said. Vivian turned slowly, her eyes wide, her voice trembling into a whisper. Why is this here? Why would Apex Vault build something like this behind a small bookstore? Grandma Hart stepped forward, gripping her cane, her eyes flickering with realization. Because the bookstore was never the point. Vivian frowned. What does that mean? Before I could answer, the lights dimmed slightly as the central screen lit up, displaying the Apex Vault crest, a stylized vault door with a rising star. Sarah Chen's voice echoed overhead through the integrated audio system. Good afternoon, everyone. The founder will join you shortly. The founder? My mother squeaked. Here today? This is incredible, my father whispered. We're meeting a billionaire in our daughter's bookstore. Vivian's breath hitched. She smoothed her blazer, adjusted her hair, stood straighter. Everyone be respectful, be professional. This is everything. This moment is everything. My grandmother looked at me, really looked at me, with quiet pride softening her features. Evelyn, she whispered, it's time. I inhaled once, deeply. Then I walked toward the executive desk at the front of the room. Evelyn, Vivian asked, confused. What are you doing? I stepped behind the desk. Sarah's voice sounded again from the speakers. Founder authentication confirmed. The screens shifted, displaying internal systems only the founder could access. Financial dashboards, executive directories, proprietary data streams. My mother's knees buckled. No, my father whispered. I don't understand. Miles took a step back, forehead beaded with sweat. Vivian stared at me as though watching reality distort. Evelyn, why is the system responding to you? I placed my hand on the glass surface, and the founder dashboard fully activated. Because it knew me. Everyone, I said quietly, lifting my eyes to the family who had spent years seeing only what they wanted to see. Welcome to Apex Vault headquarters. No one spoke, not a word. So I continued. This company, this empire, this $1.5 billion business you've been discussing for years belongs to me. Gasps, disbelief, panic, a whispered, "Oh my God," coming from somewhere near the back of the group. Vivian stepped closer, shaking her head. You're joking. This is a lie. This is impossible. It's not, I replied. I founded Apex Vault 8 years ago. I built every division you admire. I designed the systems you studied. I funded every community partnership you praised. Everything you think you know about Apex Vault came from my mind. A dead silence washed through the room, heavy and electric. Then Vivian laughed, a fractured, desperate sound. No, you work in a bookstore. You barely afford rent. You don't even own a decent coat. That, I said softly, is the part you understood least. I never told you the truth because you never cared to ask. You were too busy assuming who I was. Her face was pale, trembling at the edges. Why didn't you tell us? My mother whispered, her voice cracking. Why would you hide something like this? Because, I said, you would only value me if I were useful to you. You taught me that a long time ago. My father sank into a chair. Good Lord, we tried to give you job applications last night. Vivian's voice broke. We tried to fix you. I looked at her gently. But I was never broken. Miles stammered. So you're the one reviewing the partnership? Yes. And your decision, I held his gaze, will be based on integrity. His face drained of color. Vivian tried again. Why behind a bookstore? Why this whole mask? Because I wanted to build something without your interference, without your comparisons, without being overshadowed by the daughter you chose to elevate. My grandmother nodded slowly, her eyes warm with understanding. She wanted to be seen for who she is, not what you expected her to be. Vivian's lips trembled. Everything I said last night, everything I planned for you. Evelyn, you thought small, I said gently, because you saw me as small. Tears spilled down her cheeks, not loud, not dramatic, just quietly devastating. My mother stepped closer, voice cracking. What happens now? I looked around the room, at the people who had underestimated me, diminished me, dismissed me. Now, I said softly, we start telling the truth. The truth about who I was, the truth about who they were, and the truth about what would happen next. Tomorrow's meeting had become today's reckoning, and I was finally ready to open the vault. Vivian stood frozen in front of me, her mascara-thick lashes trembling like the surface of a lake, disturbed by a sudden storm. The rest of my family remained silent, suspended somewhere between disbelief and dawning horror. Their reflections shimmered across the glass wall behind me, small, stunned silhouettes staring at a reality they had never imagined. My father finally found his voice, though it sounded strangely hollow. Evelyn, if this is true, if all of this is really yours, then what exactly does today mean? This meeting, this presentation Vivian was preparing for? I exhaled slowly. It means something very simple. The person you wanted to impress, the person whose approval you believed would secure your future, was standing beside you the entire time, and you never saw her. No one moved, not even Vivian, especially not Vivian. She opened her mouth, closed it again, swallowed hard. Her voice, when it finally emerged, was thin and strained. You're the founder? The CEO? That's not possible. Evelyn, you work at a bookstore. I met her eyes gently. A bookstore I own. It's one of the many small businesses under Apex Vault's community initiative. You never asked about it. You assumed. Vivian pressed a shaking hand to her temple. I don't. This doesn't make sense. I put myself through graduate school. I worked 80-hour weeks. I climbed the ladder. I sacrificed everything to get where I am. You were the one who couldn't figure out your life. How could you have built all this? Her voice cracked into something sharp. Something wounded. I felt the bitterness beneath it. Bitterness that had nothing to do with me. Not really. I had learned long ago that some people couldn't accept another person's triumph unless it mirrored their own. You told me once, I reminded her softly, that success belongs only to those who set real goals. And maybe that's true, but you assumed I had none. Tears welled in her eyes. You let me believe you were struggling. You let me think you needed me. You needed to believe I did, I said gently. The room remained heavy with silence until my mother suddenly stepped forward. Her voice shook as she reached toward me. "Evelyn, sweetheart, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you trust your own family with the truth?" I looked at her hands, soft, manicured, trembling slightly, hands that had always held Vivian first. "Because," I said quietly, "you don't listen to me unless I'm failing." She flinched. Behind her, my father lowered into a chair, rubbing his temples. "We thought we were helping you. We thought we understood who you were." "You understood the version of me you preferred," I replied. "The version that required nothing from you. No pride, no investment, no belief." My grandmother stepped beside me, her cane tapping against the polished floor. She rested a hand on my arm with surprising strength. "I knew you weren't lost," she whispered. "I knew you were waiting for something. But I didn't expect this." I nodded slightly. Neither did they. Before anyone could speak again, my phone vibrated on the desk. A message flashed across the screen. "Sarah Chen. Compliance red flags triggered. We need to discuss before 2 p.m. My eyes slid toward Miles. He stiffened. Vivian noticed the shift. "What's going on?" I turned the screen toward him without a word. His eyes widened as he recognized the alert format. "You..." He stepped back, panic rising in his face. "You're monitoring my firm's data?" "No," I replied calmly. "Apex Vault is. You work for a company preparing to partner with mine. Compliance checks are routine." He swallowed hard. "There must be some mistake, a glitch." My gaze didn't waver. "There are no glitches in my system." He paled. Vivian looked between us, suddenly sensing that the danger in the room had shifted away from pride and toward exposure. "What kind of red flags?" she asked him. Miles's lips tightened. "It's nothing, technical, finance stuff Evelyn doesn't understand." I tilted my head. "Try me." He glared, voice trembling. "This is none of your business." "It becomes my business," I said, "when someone tied to my company attempts to manipulate financial records ahead of a major partnership." The air left the room in a collective gasp. Vivian stepped back from him. "Manipulate what?" He turned toward her, desperation breaking through his polished exterior. "Viv, it's not what she thinks. There were discrepancies in reports that needed adjusting. Just a technical correction." "Why?" she asked quietly. "Did you hide it from me?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. I stepped forward. "Miles has been trying to conceal multiple financial inconsistencies within his firm for months. He was hoping that your partnership with Apex Vault would solidify his position. When he learned I was the founder, he panicked. His face drained of all color. "You think you can destroy me?" "I think," I said calmly, "that you destroyed yourself." Vivian stared at him, eyes glossy, lips trembling. "Have you been using me?" He didn't answer. The silence itself was the answer. My mother, voice shaking with fury, whispered, "You brought this man into our family?" Vivian backed away as though she'd touched something burning. Her hands trembled. Her breaths came fast. "This is my life," she whispered. "My marriage, my future, and you." She turned to me sharply, grief twisting her expression. "Why today? Why now? Why reveal everything like this?" "Because," I said softly, "it was time. And because you were about to enter a room believing you were the only one worthy of being seen." She wiped her eyes angrily. "You could have told me privately." "You didn't want the truth privately," I answered. "You only listen when there's an audience." Her breath hitched in her throat. "We spent our whole lives believing you were the disappointing one," she whispered. "And all this time, you were the genius." "I'm not a genius," I corrected gently. "I'm just someone who stopped needing your approval." The softness of that truth seemed to undo something inside her. She sank into a nearby chair, staring at her hands. My entire self-worth was built on being the successful daughter, the one who made everyone proud, the one who outworked everyone else. And now, her voice cracked. You're the one they admire. I stepped toward her, slowly, quietly. They admire a stranger, I said, not me. They admired the founder of Apex Vault long before they knew it was me. Nothing about that admiration was real. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't know who I am if I'm not the best. My heart tightened painfully, not out of triumph, but out of something more complicated, more human. You don't have to be the best, I said. You just have to stop measuring your worth by how small you can make someone else. She met my gaze, grief and something like relief mingling in her eyes. I don't know if I can. You can, I replied, but only if you stop pretending success makes you invincible. My father finally rose from his chair, shoulders slumped. Evelyn, is the partnership officially dead? For now, I said honestly. Apex Vault doesn't work with people who lack integrity. He nodded slowly, not angry, not defensive, just humbled. What happens next? He asked. That depends on you, I said. On all of you. The truth is out. You can choose what kind of family you want to be from here. My mother wiped tears from her face. And what about you? Do you want to be part of this family still? The question hovered in the room like fragile glass. I don't want a family that values me only when I'm convenient, I said. But I'm willing to rebuild something, with honesty, with boundaries, with respect. Grandma nodded, her eyes warm. That's fair, she said. Maybe the fairest thing said in this house in decades. Vivienne lifted her head slowly, voice trembling. Is there a chance that we could rebuild too? You and me? I looked at her, really looked, at her brilliance, her insecurity, her pride, her loneliness. Yes, I said at last, if you're willing to stop competing with me. She nodded slowly. I never wanted to compete. I just didn't know how else to exist. I know, I whispered. Somewhere behind us, Miles exhaled sharply. So what? This is all fine now? She ruins my reputation and you all thank her? Vivienne turned toward him, eyes sharp as stormlight. You ruined your reputation, she said. Evelyn just stopped protecting the illusion. He glared at me with a hatred that felt cold and empty. You're going to regret this. I doubt it, I replied. Without waiting for another word, he stormed out of the suite, slamming the security door behind him. Silence settled like snowfall. My mother stepped closer, reaching for my hand tentatively. Evelyn, I'm sorry for all the years we didn't see you, for assuming your quietness meant weakness, for making your life harder instead of easier. Her voice wavered. You deserved more from us. I held her gaze for a long moment, then squeezed her hand gently. Thank you. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But acknowledgement. My father cleared his throat. If there's a path forward, we'll walk it, at your pace. I nodded. Vivienne exhaled shakily. I need time to understand who I've been and who I want to be. I know, I said softly. Take it. My grandmother smiled faintly. This family needed a reckoning. I glanced around the room, the glass walls, the snow beyond them, the shocked but softened faces of the people who had shaped my childhood. Sometimes, I said, the only way to save something is to break the illusion holding it together. And for the first time in years, the Hart family stood quietly in the truth. Not united, not destroyed, just real. And that was enough. For now. The drive home after leaving Apex Vault's hidden executive suite felt quieter than any Christmas I had ever experienced. Snow drifted past the streetlights in loose spirals, as if the world itself were pausing to absorb what had just unfolded. My family rode in their separate cars, scattered across the city like fragments of a broken mirror, each of them stunned, each rewriting their understanding of the last decade. I didn't go home immediately. Instead, I drove to the only place that had ever made sense when the world felt too sharp, the old greenhouse on the edge of the arts district. It was abandoned now, its glass panels smudged with time, its once vibrant ferns long since wilted, but inside was the quiet I needed. I let my breath fog against the chilled air as I stepped through the cracked doorway. The scent of damp earth clung to the shadows, soft and grounding. I sank onto the concrete bench and let the weight of everything settle in my chest. My family now knew the truth. Vivian wasn't the crown jewel they had polished for decades. I wasn't the lost cause they pitied. The roles we had been forced into had finally cracked open, and what spilled out was uglier, truer, and more liberating than I expected. The crunch of footsteps on gravel pulled me from my thoughts. I turned just as Grandma Hart stepped into the greenhouse, leaning heavily on her cane. "Thought I might find you here," she said, lowering herself beside me with more grace than her age suggested. "You used to come here after school whenever your sister made you feel small. I never forgot." I swallowed. "I didn't realize you noticed." "Oh, sweetheart." She patted my hand gently. I noticed everything no one else bothered to look at. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind that felt like a blanket rather than a wall. Finally, she sighed. "Your mother is shaken. She doesn't know how to face what she's done. She hid things, important things, from you, thinking she was protecting the family, but all she protected was her own comfort." I turned toward her slowly. "What exactly did she hide?" Grandma hesitated, her breath hitching lightly. "Your father inherited property, land from your grandfather. Valuable land. More valuable than he ever told you girls. There was a clause in the estate. Part of the land was meant for you." I blinked. "For me?" "Yes," she whispered, "because your grandfather saw himself in you. Quiet, observant, a dreamer with a sharp mind. He knew you'd do something remarkable even if no one else believed it." My chest tightened. Why didn't I ever know about it? "Your mother was convinced giving you responsibility would distract you from what she believed Vivian needed: attention, support, praise. She thought withholding it would keep the peace, but peace built on lies doesn't last." I closed my eyes. For years I'd believed the family's favoritism was rooted in love. Now I saw it clearly. It was rooted in fear. The fear of imbalance. The fear of choosing both daughters equally. The fear of acknowledging the daughter who never asked for anything might be the one deserving most. Grandma touched my cheek lightly. "You weren't meant to be cut out of the will. She changed the paperwork after your grandfather died. Quietly. Without telling your father." The breath in my lungs turned cold. "She took my inheritance." "She redirected it," Grandma corrected softly. "Said you didn't have the discipline to handle it responsibly. She convinced herself it was for your own good." I stared at the frosted glass panels above us. "And what does she expect me to do now?" "Nothing," Grandma murmured. "For once, she expects nothing. She's scared, Evelyn. Scared of losing you. Scared of facing herself." I didn't answer. Instead, I let the truth filter through the cracks inside me, filling each empty place with something sharp and shimmering. When Grandma finally rose to leave, she pressed a kiss to my forehead. "Don't let their regret turn into your burden. You did nothing wrong. You simply became the woman you were meant to be." After she left, I lingered in the greenhouse until my breath no longer fogged in front of me. When I finally drove home, the city lights blurred through the snow like drifting stars. My apartment felt warmer than usual when I entered. I brewed tea and sat near the window, letting the steam warm my face. I expected silence. Instead, my phone buzzed. "Vivienne, can we talk?" I hesitated before replying. "Me, if you want." 10 minutes later, a soft knock sounded at my door. I opened it to find my sister standing there, no makeup, hair pulled into a loose bun, wrapped in a coat that looked suddenly too big for her. She stepped inside cautiously. "I didn't want to go home. I kept hearing your voice in that conference room. I nodded. She sat on the sofa, her hands trembling slightly as she held a mug of tea. Evelyn, she began, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you the truth. The version of myself you saw today, that's the one I've been hiding from myself. Her voice cracked. I don't know how to be anything but the best. Ever since we were kids, Mom and Dad made it clear who I had to be. The perfect one, the successful one. And when you didn't compete, it terrified me. Because if you weren't trying, then maybe success wasn't everything. And if success wasn't everything, then who was I? I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, not fully. But understanding. She swallowed hard. I should have been your sister instead of your rival. I should have asked what you wanted, not assumed it. I should have known that quiet doesn't mean small. Tears welled in her eyes. Every time you succeeded silently, it made me feel like my loudness meant nothing. And instead of seeing your brilliance, I treated you like a threat. You don't have to compete with me anymore, I said gently. You never did. She looked at me with a mixture of grief and gratitude. Do you still want a relationship with me? Yes, I said softly. But a new one. Built on truth. She nodded, wiping her cheeks. I can do that. I want to do that. We sat in silence for a moment, breathing the same air, finally equal, finally honest. Then she whispered, What happens with the partnership? We'll revisit it, I said, if Raytheon rebuilds its values, if you rebuild yours. She exhaled in relief. I can do better, I will. When she left, I stood by the window again. This time the world didn't feel heavy. The next knock came 20 minutes later. My mother. She stood in the hallway, eyes swollen, hair messy, wrapped in a blanket instead of a coat. May I come in? She whispered. I stepped aside. She entered slowly, as if crossing into sacred land. Your grandmother told you, didn't she? She asked. About the land, about the will. Yes. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. I kept thinking I was protecting the family. I didn't realize I was tearing it apart. I watched her fight for breath. I need you to hear something, she said. I did what I did because I thought Vivian needed the world to love her. I never realized how much I was hurting you. Her voice cracked into a broken whisper. You deserved everything we denied you. A long silence stretched between us before she continued. I want to fix it, whatever it takes. I know it won't erase anything, but I want to try. I felt the fullness of her regret. Not performative, not polished, but raw and vulnerable. We'll talk, I said gently, but not tonight. She nodded, sobbing softly. That's fair. When she left, the apartment fell into silence once more, but the silence felt different, not empty, open, possible. I curled onto the sofa and let the warmth of the room settle around me. Tomorrow the world would wake up to another quiet Christmas. But tonight, after years of shrinking, years of being misunderstood, years of hiding the truth of who I was, I finally felt seen. Not because I was a billionaire, not because I had built an empire, but because I had finally stopped letting their version of me shape who I allowed myself to be. The woman they had underestimated was gone, and the woman I had always been was finally stepping fully into the light. Snow was already falling again when I stepped out of the greenhouse later that night, soft flakes drifting through the amber glow of the street lamps, like pieces of a world gently coming apart. I walked slowly, letting the cold air settle the emotions still stirring in my chest. The revelation, the confrontation, the apologies, they were only the beginning. What came next would be just as difficult, but in a different way. Because now my family knew the truth, and truths like mine didn't sit quietly. They demanded movement. They changed everything they touched. By morning, my phone was vibrating nonstop, board members wanting updates, compliance officers requesting signatures, analysts demanding my final verdict on Raytheon dynamics, and, unexpectedly, a voicemail from my father. I didn't listen to it. Not yet. Instead, I drove to the Apex Vault satellite office on Oak Street, the same building where my family had followed me yesterday with so much pride, confusion, and disbelief. Today the street was empty, the sidewalks covered in a thin sheet of snow. I unlocked the front door of the bookstore facade and slipped inside, flipping on the lights one by one until the space glowed with familiar warmth. It felt good to stand here again, not performing brokenness, not pretending to struggle, not hiding, just being. I walked toward the hidden panel at the back of the store and pressed the concealed button. The bookshelf shifted, sliding open to reveal the modern corridor leading into the executive wing. My footsteps echoed off the clean floors as I walked inside, the air turning cool and crisp as the door closed behind me. Inside the conference suite, Sarah was already waiting. She looked tired but focused, a stack of files in her hands. "We reviewed the extended compliance data," she said as I entered, "and the situation with Revion Dynamics is worse than initially reported." I nodded, bracing myself. "Show me." She laid out documents across the polished metal table, bank transfers, internal emails, falsified performance reports. Each piece pointed to the same conclusion. Miles Crane had been manipulating numbers for at least a year, and Vivian, somehow, incredibly, had been completely in the dark. Sarah's voice softened. "I know this complicates things with your sister." "It doesn't complicate the truth," I murmured. "It only complicates the fallout." Then she handed me the last file. "This one is personal." I opened it and froze. Inside were clipped recordings, supplied by a whistleblower in Revion's finance department. Miles had spoken openly, recklessly, about the Hart family, about Vivian's ambitions, and about me. He'd known more than I expected. He'd suspected my connection to Apex Vault weeks before our meeting, and instead of telling Vivian, he'd used it as leverage, manipulating her, positioning himself to benefit if she secured the partnership, even mocking her behind closed doors. My jaw tightened. "He planned to ride your sister's career into wealth and influence," Sarah said. "But he didn't care about her. Not the way she thought." I set the file down slowly. "This isn't just business misconduct. This is predatory behavior." Sarah nodded. "The board wants to know your final recommendation." "Full termination of all negotiations," I said without hesitation. "Effective immediately." "And Vivian?" I exhaled. "I'll speak to her myself." I spent another hour reviewing documents, drafting responses, and stabilizing the teams that had been thrown into chaos after yesterday's dramatic reveal. Apex Vault ran on consistency and integrity. It was my job to restore both. When I finally stepped out of the executive suite and returned to the bookstore section, I found someone waiting for me. My father. He stood near the display table, hands folded, shoulders tight. For a moment he looked younger, not in years, but in vulnerability. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "I wasn't sure when you'd be back." "I work here," I replied, an edge of humor softening my tone. He smiled faintly but didn't step closer. "I left you a voicemail." "I know." I said some things I should have said years ago. I didn't respond. I let him continue. "I spent your whole life believing success looked one way," he murmured. "Loud, linear, predictable. I didn't understand that your success was quiet because it was built in places I never bothered to look." There was pain in his voice, real pain. "You're everything I used to admire in other people," he said. "Strong, visionary, self-made. But because it came from my own daughter, I couldn't see it. I think I didn't want to see it." He finally stepped closer. "I'm sorry, Evelyn." The words trembled, not performed, not forced. True. "Thank you," I said softly. He cleared his throat, blinking quickly. "Your mother is making a mess of the kitchen. She keeps picking up pots and putting them back down. Says she's processing. I think she's terrified." "So am I," I admitted. He nodded. "Terrified is human." Before he left, he turned at the door. "Whatever path you choose, with us or without us, Know that I'm proud of you. That's all." And then he stepped outside into the snow, leaving me alone in the quiet hum of the store. I stood there for a long moment, absorbing his words, letting them settle. Then I heard the bell above the door ring again. This time it was Vivian. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes were red. She clutched a folder to her chest. "Evelyn," she whispered, "we need to talk." "Yes," I said. "We do." She sat at the table near the window, the same seat she'd taken yesterday when everything began unraveling. "I got a message from Rivian's board this morning," she said quietly. "They confronted Miles with the compliance findings. He denied everything, blamed me, said I pushed him to inflate our numbers to chase a deal with Apex Vault." I winced. "I'm sorry." "That's not the worst part," she continued, voice breaking. "When they asked him why he thought you were involved, he laughed and said, and I quote, 'That little sister of yours, she's nothing, just a bookstore kid with a savior complex.'" Her hands trembled. "He used me," she whispered. "And to him, I was just a stepping stone." I reached across the table and touched her hand. "Vivian, this isn't your fault." She pressed her lips together, tears threatening again. "I've been so desperate to be the perfect one that I ignored every sign. I trusted someone who saw me as a tool, and I was so busy judging you that I didn't notice the person destroying my life was the man standing beside me." "And that," I said gently, "is exactly why you're going to grow from this." She let out a shaky breath. "I'm scared." "So was I replied. "For years." We sat quietly for a long time, until she finally whispered, "What happens to the partnership?" "It's gone," I said simply. "But your career isn't." She nodded. "I want to rebuild, not just my work, my values." "That's the first step," I said. She took a deep breath. "Evelyn, you saved me." "No," I corrected gently. "You saved yourself. I just told the truth." When she finally left, the bookstore felt warm again, not because everything was resolved, but because honesty had opened a door that had been locked for years. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing reconstruction plans for Apex Vault's upcoming expansions. It felt different this time, lighter. Not because the work had changed, but because I had. By evening, the snow had stopped and the sky glowed in muted shades of lavender and silver. I closed the store and stepped outside, letting the cold wind brush my face. The world felt new, not perfect, not fixed, but new. As I walked toward my car, I realized something quietly profound. For the first time in my life, my family was beginning to see me. Not the version they'd invented, not the disappointment they had projected, not the failure they believed they needed to rescue. Me, a woman who had built her own world, a woman who no longer needed to shrink to fit into theirs, a woman finally free to redefine every part of her life, including them. And somewhere deep inside my chest, I felt the first flicker of peace. A peace I had earned. A peace I intended to keep. The morning after Christmas felt too bright, almost intrusive, as if the sky itself had decided to pry open everything that had been hidden. My body was still heavy with the aftermath of yesterday's revelation, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. I showered, dressed in soft charcoal wool, and tied my hair back. Today I would return to Apex Vault as myself, not the quiet bookstore girl my family once pitied, and not the mysterious founder they had just discovered, but something more honest than either version, a woman stepping fully into her truth. I arrived at the Apex Vault headquarters downtown a few minutes before 9. Though the public believed the top floors were leased office space, the truth lay behind reinforced glass and a biometric scanner that recognized only 5 authorized executives. And me. When the door slid open with its familiar hiss, I stepped inside and breathed in the clean, cool air of my other life. The floors shimmered like polished silver. Soft blue light glowed along the edges of the corridors. Screens flickered with real-time analytics and maps of nationwide operations. My life's work hummed around me, steady and alive. The staff bowed their heads politely as I passed. Good morning, Ms. Hart. Good morning, I said, letting my voice fall into the tone reserved for leadership. Calm, certain, present. I wasn't pretending now. Sarah Chen waited in the conference suite with a tablet in her hands and concern in her eyes. We need to talk, she said. Compliance sent their full findings about Revian dynamics and about Miles Crane. I nodded, preparing myself. Tell me everything. She tapped the screen, and a series of documents illuminated between us. Financial discrepancies dating back 18 months, misreported expenses, inflated contract values, under-the-table payments to external consultants, and a history of intimidation toward junior analysts who questioned him. Heat rose beneath my skin, slow and steady. Vivian didn't know. No, Sarah said. There's no evidence she was involved. In fact, her division has one of the cleanest records we've seen. A breath escaped me. Not relief exactly, but something close. And the board? They're waiting on your decision. But based on our standards, Revian Dynamics cannot be approved for partnership without corrective measures. Significant ones. Meaning Miles must be removed. Yes, immediately, and Revian must submit to a year-long integrity audit. I imagined Vivian hearing this. The woman who had built her career on achievement, control, and perfection. The woman who just yesterday had seen her carefully curated world shatter under the weight of truths she never expected. I felt a quiet ache inside me, not pity but empathy. Vindication and grief can coexist. Yesterday had shown me that. Prepare a formal notice, I said. I'll speak with Vivian personally. Sarah nodded and moved to her desk. I stepped into my private office overlooking the city. Snow dusted the rooftops, transforming skyscrapers into white monoliths. For a moment I simply stood there, hands resting on the cool steel railing of the window frame. The girl who once felt invisible lived here too, in the memory of long nights building code alone in dim apartments, in the ache of wanting to be seen by a family who never looked long enough. But that girl no longer controlled the steering of my life. I felt her finally exhale. By noon, Vivian arrived at the building. Security escorted her upstairs, though I could see instantly that Vivian Hart needed no escort today. She walked with shoulders squared, chin lifted, bravery layered over vulnerability, like a thin sheet of glass over trembling water. When she entered my office, she paused, breath catching. "It's beautiful," she whispered, eyes sweeping across the sleek architecture. "All this time you came here every day, and I never knew." I offered her a small smile. "Sit, we have things to discuss." She sat slowly, smoothing her coat across her lap. "I'm ready." But when I looked into her eyes, I saw she was afraid. Fear was a new expression for her. It softened her, humanized her. I folded my hands. Sarah has completed the compliance review. There are serious issues with Revian Dynamics. Vivian swallowed. "It's Miles, isn't it?" "Yes." Tears glimmered along her lashes. "How bad?" "Bad enough that any partnership between Apex Vault and Revian is impossible while he remains in any position of authority." Her hands clenched together. "And what about me? My division?" "You're clean." She exhaled shakily, shoulders loosening. Then, just as quickly, they tightened again. "But this still ruins everything." "No," I said gently. "It doesn't ruin everything. It just changes the path forward." A fragile silence filled the space between us. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know what to do." And that was the truth behind all her superiority. She had never learned how to navigate life when she wasn't already winning. I stood and moved closer, sitting in the chair beside her instead of across from her. "Vivian, listen to me. You are brilliant, driven, capable, but you tied your identity to the wrong things. Titles, achievements, the illusion of perfection. When the truth cracks that shell, it hurts, but it also frees you." She wiped her cheek quickly. "You're making this sound poetic. It's not. It's humiliating." "Humiliation and humility feel similar when they first hit," I said softly. "But only one of them builds you." She looked up at me with something raw in her expression. I don't want to lose everything I've worked for. You won't, I said, but the work ahead will be uncomfortable. You'll have to rebuild from values rather than vanity, and you'll have to decide whether your loyalty lies with integrity or with a man who used you as a shield. Shock flickered across her face. I never thought of it that way. No one wants to, I murmured. But truth doesn't need permission to exist. She stared out the window for a long moment. The city below was a mosaic of white rooftops and gray streets. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. I want to fix what I can, and I want to be better. I hate the person I've been. You don't have to hate her, I said. Just retire her. Let her rest. A shaky laugh escaped her. I didn't expect wisdom to come wrapped in kindness from you. I smiled slightly. Neither did I. For a moment, we simply breathed together. Two sisters stripped of competition, stripped of expectation, stripped of the roles our family had forced us into. Then I handed her the notice, the official document outlining the compliance violations. She scanned it, jaw tightening. Miles is finished. Yes, I said, and now you decide what you'll become without him. She folded the paper slowly. What about us, you and me? I inhaled deeply. That depends on the honesty you bring to the next chapter. We can build something real, but only if we leave the old dynamic behind. She nodded, and for the first time in years, I believed her. After she left my office, I stayed seated at the window, letting the weight of the conversation settle. Snow continued falling in delicate spirals. Somewhere in the city, Miles was likely scrambling to salvage his reputation. Somewhere else, my mother was still crying over years of misjudgment. My father was rethinking every assumption. My grandmother was probably waiting for my call, knowing I wasn't done piecing together the rest of the family puzzle. The world was still shifting, and for once, it was shifting in the direction of truth. I turned from the window, straightened my blazer, and walked down the hall to the conference floor. My team waited there, engineers, designers, directors, each ready to pivot into the next phase of Apex Vault's growth. They greeted me with warmth, professionalism, and something else, respect that came not from bloodline or expectation, but from the work I had done with my own hands. And in that moment, I felt a sharp clarity. My family had finally discovered who I was. But I had always known. Later that afternoon, as I stepped outside into the bitter cold, a single thought settled in my chest with the weight and comfort of something long overdue. This was the beginning of my life without apology. No more hiding, no more shrinking, no more allowing other people's narratives to define me. Snowflakes melted in my hair as I walked toward my car. The city felt new, open, possible. For the first time, I wasn't returning to a version of myself that was small enough for others to accept. I was stepping fully into the woman I had always been. Unhidden, unashamed, undeniable. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway that evening, the Christmas lights that had felt festive the night before now seemed dimmed, as if the house itself sensed the weight of what had cracked open inside it. Snow still drifted from the sky in light, whispering flakes. The world outside was calm, almost gentle. Inside, nothing was calm at all. Every window glowed with the uneasy warmth of a family facing truths too large to contain. I stepped out of my car and walked toward the front door. Before I could knock, it opened, and my father stood there, not rigid and poised as usual, but slumped, shoulders sagging, face older than I remembered. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "come in." His voice held no command, no disappointment, no subtle criticism, just hesitation. I stepped inside. The house was quieter than I had ever known it to be. No clinking glasses, no congratulatory laughter, no performance of perfection. It felt like stepping into an empty theater after the show had ended. The stage lights dimmed, the costumes discarded, the audience gone. My mother appeared from the hallway, wiping her hands on a dish towel, though she clearly hadn't been cooking. Her eyes were swollen, her voice fragile. "We didn't know if you'd come back," she whispered. "I said I would," I replied. "And we weren't sure you would still keep your word," she admitted. "Everything changed so quickly. We're not used to being the ones who need to apologize." I nodded once. "I know." My father cleared his throat as though forcing words out that had been lodged for decades. "You should sit. We need to talk. All of us." I followed them to the living room. The same room where they'd once celebrated Vivienne as if she were royalty. The same room where they'd given me a bag filled with job applications and budget worksheets, believing they were saving me. Tonight, the atmosphere was completely different. Vivienne stood near the fireplace, arms wrapped around herself, her eyes rimmed red but steady. She didn't look shattered anymore. She looked stripped down, raw, vulnerable, and strangely real. Not the flawless CEO, not the polished success story, just a woman trying to figure out who she was without her crown. When she saw me, she offered a small, sincere nod. "Hi." "Hi," I said softly. She gestured toward the couch. "Sit, please." I sat. My parents lowered themselves onto the opposite sofa, mirroring my discomfort. The air felt thick with unsaid words, but for once, no one rushed to fill the silence with excuses or defensiveness. Grandma Hart shuffled into the room with her cane, lowering herself into the armchair beside me. She reached for my hand, squeezing gently. "I told them," she murmured. "All of it. What should have been yours, what was taken. They know now." My father shut his eyes briefly. My mother inhaled sharply, guilt curling her posture into something small. "We have wronged you," she said simply. Her words hung in the room like something sacred and dangerous. Vivienne sat forward, her voice trembling. "Evelyn, I need to say this before anyone else speaks. I am sorry, not because everything fell apart, not because I lost something, but because I was cruel to you." Her eyes lifted to mine. "I spent years building my confidence on the assumption that you had none. I measured my worth by your supposed lack of worth. I needed you small so I could feel big, and that is something I'll regret for the rest of my life." Emotion slid through me slowly, not sharp and jagged like it once had been, but warm, fragile, aching. "Thank you for saying that," I whispered. She nodded, swallowing hard. My father rubbed his palms together, gathering courage like a man preparing to confess something long buried. "I should have been the one who believed in you," he said. "I was your father. My job was to see you, and I didn't. I let your quietness fool me into thinking you weren't capable of greatness." My mother pressed trembling fingers to her mouth. "I let fear guide me," she admitted. "Fear that if you succeeded, our family would fracture. Fear that I wouldn't know how to support two daughters without choosing one over the other. And I chose wrong. I chose comfort instead of courage." Her voice broke. "I am so sorry." I let the apology settle inside me, its sincerity, its grief, its longing. This wasn't a neat resolution. This wasn't pretend forgiveness for the sake of family harmony. This was the first time in my life they had spoken to me without pride or expectation or judgment wrapped around their words. Vivienne leaned forward. "Evelyn, can we rebuild? Maybe not all at once, but slowly? I want to be your sister. Not your competition, not your shadow, and not the person standing above you. Just your sister." Her voice cracked again. "Will you let me try?" I looked at her carefully, at the woman who had spent so long performing success that she'd forgotten how to simply be human, at the sister who had hurt me, envied me, underestimated me, but who now sat before me with her armor shattered, her truth exposed. "Yes," I said quietly, "but we rebuild with honesty and boundaries." She nodded. "I can do that." My father leaned back, exhaling heavily. "Evelyn, Do you want to stay involved with this family, after everything we've done? I thought about it, really thought about it. The years of dismissal, the quiet hurts, the unspoken comparisons, the expectations that suffocated us all. And then I thought about now, this moment, the first moment in my life when they were no longer speaking from a pedestal above me, but from the ground beside me. I want a family, I said softly. But I won't return to the role you assigned me, not ever again. If we move forward, it has to be on new terms. My mother nodded through tears. Whatever terms you need, we'll honor them. The house fell into a soft stillness, full of breath and ache and something that could someday become peace. Grandma squeezed my hand again. You've always been the strongest one, she whispered. Not because you shouted the loudest, but because you survived being unheard. Her words cracked something inside me, not in a painful way, but in a releasing way. Vivian wiped her eyes and let out a shaky laugh. It's strange, you know. All the years I believed you were lost, and now I see you were ahead of all of us. I smiled. Maybe. Or maybe I just finally stopped letting you define the map. She laughed through tears. Fair. My father leaned forward. If there is anything left for us to do, anything we can fix, anything we can restore, you tell us. There is, I said after a moment. There are things to restore, trust, respect, and truth. But those take time. Time we're willing to give, my mother whispered. We sat there for a while, the five of us, not speaking, not rushing, just breathing, just sitting with the unfamiliar feeling of honesty. It felt like being handed the pieces of something fragile and important, something broken long before any of us had admitted it. Eventually, Grandma rose from her chair. I think that's enough emotion for one evening, she muttered, wiping her glasses. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Let's start by letting this girl breathe. She nodded toward me with a rare smile. You've done enough tearing down illusions for 2 days straight. Everyone chuckled weakly. When I left the house, the sky was darker, the air colder, but something inside me felt strangely light, as if an old tension in my body had finally released its grip. I walked to my car slowly, letting the snow settle on my coat, my hair, my eyelashes. The road stretched out before me in a long, quiet ribbon of white. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that the road ahead was mine, really mine, not shaped by my family's expectations, not dimmed by their assumptions, not denied by their blind spots, mine to define, mine to protect, mine to walk without apology. I slid into the driver's seat, closed the door, and exhaled deeply into the silence. Tomorrow there would be more conversations, more healing, more truth. But tonight, as I sat with the echo of my family's first real apology, I felt something new growing in the space inside me where hurt used to live. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. The morning after my family's apologies felt strangely still, as if the entire world paused to let the dust settle. Sunlight crept across my bedroom floor in long golden stripes. I lay there for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside, letting my thoughts drift through everything that had happened. The truth had finally come out. Nothing would ever be the same again, and oddly, that felt right. By mid-morning I was back at the bookstore, my quiet refuge, my community space, my sanctuary that had become the doorway to a billion-dollar empire. The bells above the entrance chimed softly as I unlocked the door. The familiar smell of old paper and pine-scented candles greeted me. For the first time in years, I entered without shrinking myself to fit anyone's expectations. I wasn't hiding anymore. Sarah arrived not long after, her cheeks pink from the cold. She carried a folder tucked beneath her arm. We need to finalize the partnership review for Rivian Dynamics, she said gently. And your sister is waiting outside. I blinked. Vivian is here? She asked if she could speak with you privately. I nodded, exhaling slowly. Send her in. A moment later, Vivienne stepped into the store holding 2 cups of coffee. She wore a soft winter coat rather than her usual tailored armor. She offered 1 cup to me with a tentative smile. "A peace offering. It's the caramel latte you used to like. I wasn't sure if you still drink it." I took it. "I do." She glanced around the store with an expression I hadn't seen before, something close to awe. I never realized how beautiful this place is. When I walked in before, I didn't actually look. I only judged. "That's because you weren't really seeing me," I said softly. She nodded. "I know." We sat at the little table near the window, the one surrounded by plants and a stack of secondhand poetry books. The morning sun cast warm patches of light across Vivienne's hands as she clasped them together. "I came to ask you something," she said. "Not about business. About us." I looked at her quietly. "I don't want our relationship to exist because we're obligated by blood," she whispered. "I want it because we choose it. I want to understand the sister I never took the time to know." Her voice trembled. "Will you let me try?" For the first time, I felt no resentment toward her, only a tired ache and a sliver of hope. "Yes," I whispered, "but slowly. We rebuild with honesty, not pressure." Vivienne nodded with relief, wiping a tear quickly before it fell. "And Evelyn," she added, "I'm stepping back from the Rivian deal, not because of you, but because of me. I need to rebuild my career with integrity instead of ambition alone." "That's a wise decision," I said gently. "No," she corrected softly. "That's your influence." Before we said goodbye, she wrapped her arms around me in a tentative, delicate hug, the kind of hug only a sister who never learned how to hug properly could give. It was clumsy and earnest and real. After she left, the store felt changed. Not brighter, just more open, as though forgiveness had cracked a window somewhere inside the room. Around noon, the bell above the door jingled again. This time, it was my mother. She walked in slowly, holding a box wrapped in faded ribbon. Her eyes looked less swollen today, but her voice still carried the weight of regret. "I brought you something," she said, placing the box on the counter. When I untied the ribbon and lifted the lid, I froze. Inside were old journals, my journals. The pages filled with sketches of inventions I had dreamed about at 13, scribbled business ideas written in messy loops, poems about feeling unseen, pages stained with the tears of a girl who thought she didn't matter. I looked up at her. "You kept these?" She nodded slowly. "I found them after you moved out. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. Every time I read them, I realized how terribly I misunderstood you. I wanted so badly to shape you into someone I recognized. I never let myself see who you really were." A long silence settled between us. Then she spoke again, in a voice stripped bare. "I don't expect forgiveness today. But I want to earn it. I want to know the woman you became when I wasn't paying attention." Tears stung my eyes, not from pain but from something softer. "Then start by listening," I whispered. She nodded. "I'm ready." We spent nearly an hour talking, not about the billion-dollar empire, not about the reveal, not about the mistakes, but about me, my childhood, my dreams, the way the world looked through my eyes. She listened as though she had never heard my voice before, and for the first time in my entire life, I believed she truly wanted to. Later that afternoon, Sarah and I moved to the back office to finalize the formal termination of the Rivian partnership. I signed the documents with steady hands. There was no hesitation. The decision was right. As I finished, Sarah looked at me with something warm in her expression. "You rebuilt more than just a company this week," she said softly. "You rebuilt yourself." Maybe I had. That evening I returned home and sat beside my window. Snow drifted across the city in ribbons of silver. Lights flickered in distant apartments. Somewhere far below, children laughed, dragging sleds behind them. Life continued, soft and steady. I held one of my old journals on my lap, a worn blue one with peeling edges. Inside was a drawing of a girl sitting atop a stack of books that formed the shape of a staircase. At the top was a sketch of a city skyline. Below it, in uneven handwriting, I had written, "One day I will build something bigger than myself, and I will not need anyone's permission to do it." I closed the journal with a slow smile. I had kept my promise. But I had learned something more important this week. Success means very little when it's used to hide. It becomes something much more powerful when it becomes the truth you're willing to stand in, unapologetically. From the window, the city lights shimmered like a constellation of small hopes. My phone buzzed beside me. It was Vivienne. "Vivienne, dinner at my place next week? Just you and me. No expectations, no performance, just..." "Sisters?" I typed back. "Me. Yes, I'd like that." As the message sent, something inside me settled. Not finished, not healed, but finally moving in the right direction. A quiet transformation was happening within my family, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of being part of it. I leaned back into my pillows, letting the warm glow of the lamp spill across the room. This was the ending I never imagined. Not vengeance, not triumph, but reclamation. Not just of power, but of self. And perhaps that is the greatest revenge of all, refusing to remain the version of yourself that others decided you had to be. Before I turned off the light, I whispered into the quiet room, "This is just the beginning." If you've stayed with me through this journey, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to redefine your worth after being underestimated by people who should have known you best? Tell me what part of this story spoke to you, and if you'd like more stories about family drama, hidden strength, and unexpected transformation, make sure to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe. Your voice helps our stories reach others who may need them too.